Now has happened what I have been forecasting for weeks. Hitler does not want to accept as true what every simple soldier can see. The danger confronting us is gigantic.
All hell's broken loose. An unimaginable fire is falling on our positions. The ground is being literally plowed up. The main strike appears to have hit the Romanians.
Everyone at my command post was looking feverishly at his watch. All attention was focused on the main attack sector, where in a matter of hours, the fate of our offensive should be decided.
In this case, must the army really ask for a decision from the Army High Command? Here, we're talking about almost 330,000 men.
I have already put the whole army on alert. It looks extremely serious. Strecker is under frontal attack, and he's even more worried about his flanks. The Romanians left of the 11th Corps are targeted as well. This time, it's the real thing.
In the last episode, we saw that very few believed in the success of yet another Soviet counteroffensive, even the Soviet command itself. Yet they believed in Operation Mars, which is why they allocated more resources to it and had Zhukov directly supervising, whereas Uran was left to Vasilevsky. And indeed, the operation did have only few chances of success, contrary to the popular belief that as soon as it was unleashed the Germans were doomed because they didn't see it coming. This was not the case at all. There were really very few chances for Operation Uran to succeed and many to fail. As we'll see in the upcoming episodes, it barely achieved its primary objectives, and not even all of them, and some with several strokes of luck. As we'll explain, it came close to disaster several times and could have failed at several key moments. Just like the case for the battle in the city, where the Soviet 62nd Army was, at numerous times, close to collapse. Let's review the details of the first day of operations, from the very beginning. Several hours before the assault, all commanders had finally been given the relevant instructions. Units moved into their attack positions, while guns were uncovered and set in place. During the night, freezing fogs came down upon the Don steppe, accompanied by light snow, reducing the visibility on the battlefield to about 100 meters. At 0720 hours on the 19th of November 1942, having just received the code word Siren, the guns of the southwestern and Don fronts were loaded. Trumpets were sounded, as if in a scene from the Bible. At 0730 hours, the Katyusha rocket launchers fired the first salvos, and were soon joined by the 3,500 guns and mortars stretching along the few breakthrough sectors, engulfing them in a gigantic maelstrom. Unable to adjust their fire amid the mists and snowfalls, they aimed at previously registered targets. As a result, the shelling was more impressive than accurate, and a large portion of the Romanian defences remained intact. But it was nonetheless so powerful that German troops could hear it from Kalach, 100 kilometers away. Colonel Adam was shaken out of his sleep by the telephone, and even as he was grasping for it, he heard a distant rumbling. This was the duty officer calling. "Alarm, Colonel, to the Chief of Staff, immediately." That was the beginning of the Soviet counteroffensive. There was no doubt about it. Adam put on his uniform and rushed to the headquarters section. Officers and soldiers were already gathering as if they had been torn from their sleep. The Chief of Staff, Major General Schmidt, was sitting next to the telephone.
I have already put the whole army on alert. It looks extremely serious. The commander is expected in a minute. Strecker is under frontal attack, and he's even more worried about his flanks. The Romanians left of the 11th Corps are targeted as well. This time, it's the real thing. Just sit down.
Shortly afterwards, the Army Commander-in-Chief appeared beside Schmidt. The telephone rang. General Strecker, commander of the 11th Corps, reported.
All hell's broken loose. An unimaginable fire is falling on our positions. The ground is being literally plowed up. The main strike appears to have hit the Romanians. I telephoned my left-hand neighbors, the Romanian Fourth Corps. Their commander was really pessimistic. He fears panic breaking out among his troops. Our divisions are at their posts, but can hardly see anything through the snow. We will keep Army headquarters informed.
Paulus gave Strecker the following briefing.
To ensure the safety of your left flank, send 14th Panzer Division southwest of Malokletskaya. Go as close as you can as soon as the direction of the enemy attack is identified.
Paulus put the telephone down, looked at us silently for a moment, then picked up the telephone again.
Connect me with Army Group B.
A staff officer of the Army Group took the first report from 6th Army about the Soviet artillery preparation. From then on, the ringing of the telephone in the Chief of Staff's room was never-ending. Reports, questions, orders, all chased each other. The withdrawal of 14th Panzer Corps from Stalingrad was prepared, but 6th Army's command still did not know enough about the enemy's intentions or its direction of attack. At about 0700 hours, General Strecker reported again.
The enemy has gone into the attack from the bridgehead. We've been able to hold to our position so far. The thrust is directed at the Romanian Third Army. 376th Infantry Division informs us that the Russians have broken through the positions of the Romanian Fourth Corps and are pushing south with tanks. The situation with the Romanian 1st Cavalry Division is completely unknown. It no longer has connection with its left-hand neighbor. I will pull back 376th Infantry Division and put it to protect our flank with its front facing west. The telephone connection with 44th Infantry Division has been destroyed. A motorcyclist reports that the shelling has almost destroyed the foremost positions. The Red tanks have crushed everything the Romanians had.
Although the bad weather was arguably a disadvantage to the offensive since it hindered artillery, it also offered extra concealment for the advancing formations. And if it prevented the VVS bombers from taking off, it also hampered the Luftwaffe. Only a handful of sorties were registered that day, and not many more during the next few days. At 0850 hours, the artillery barrage shifted to the depths of enemy territory, and infantry with supporting armour rushed forward. The infantry of the 5th Tank, 21st and 65th Armies penetrated the first defence lines of the Romanian Army's 2nd, 5th and 4th Corps. The forward lines were quickly taken in the main attack sectors, but Soviet troops could hardly make further progress as they encountered sturdy resistance around the many remaining bastions. Moreover, in some areas the defence lines were reformed soon after the first wave of infantry passed through, threatening to transform the penetration into a multi-layered cake. At 1000 hours, the 48th Panzer Corps was released from the reserve and sent forwards to Kletskaya, where the German 22nd Panzer Division was to join the Romanian 1st Armoured and 7th Cavalry Divisions for a combined intervention in 21st Army sector, which was believed to be the main attack axis. A reserve regiment from the 14th Panzer Division was also to join, but could not do so due to a lack of fuel for its 40 operable tanks. 6th Army reports on the 19th of November 1942. Weather. The temperature is above 0 degrees. Overcast. On the icy ground a thin layer of mud formed. Today the expected offensive was launched against the right flank of the 3rd Romanian Army. It began at 0530 hours between points 483 and 496. At 0945 hours, the Chief of the Operations Department of the Army Group was first informed that the offensive against the Romanians had begun. The Army Group is asking whether the withdrawal of all remaining units of the 14th Panzer Division from Stalingrad affects the plans for the offensive there. The Chief of Staff of the Army answers that the withdrawal of these forces will lead to the cancellation of the offensive planned for tomorrow, since the division bears the main burden of this operation. At 11:05 hours, the Chief of Staff of the Army Group, General von Sodenstern, told the Chief of Staff of the Army that the Army Group has decided to send the 48th Panzer Corps to the Blinov sector. The Army must report whether it will be able to transfer additional forces to the support of the defence in the Malokletskaya area. Paulus authorized the withdrawal of the 376th Infantry Division to a flanking position, ordering it to cooperate with the 14th Panzer Division and attached the Romanian 1st Cavalry Division to the 11th Corps. Army Group B informed 6th Army that the Soviet artillery had been firing thousands of tons of steel at the Romanian 3rd Army's positions for hours. Then two armies broke out of the bridgehead near Kletskaya and Serafimovic. The Romanians had defended themselves bravely, but were overrun and forced to flee. At this moment, Soviet tank units carrying infantry and some cavalry units were thrusting further south. Neither German nor Romanian command posts could say where the Soviets were aiming at. Only one thing was certain: 6th Army was already under threat from the rear. Attempts to get a clearer idea of the situation in 11th Corps proved unsuccessful. The Corps adjutant informed Colonel Adam that the telephone lines had been almost continuously cut since very early morning. In his opinion, the 44th and 376th Infantry Divisions must have suffered severe casualties. For the Army Headquarters staff, the 19th of November passed in anxious waiting. Catastrophic reports piled up hour after hour, although by evening they still had no precise knowledge of the extent of the Soviet success. It was obvious to all that they were in grave danger. At 11:30 hours, when the German command realized the 5th Tank Army was actually the major threat, Heim's Panzer Corps was redirected to the northwest by personal orders from Hitler. At this time, Roth's division was approaching Vasilevsky from the southwest, while Georg's was yet 20 kilometers away to the northeast. But as the 1st Armoured Division could not be reached by radio, it did not receive the order and did not turn. At 1200 hours, Chistiakov and Romanenko decided to unleash their mobile groups. The 1st, 26th and 4th Tank Corps left their assembly areas some kilometers in the rear and marched to the battlefield. An hour later they were deployed on the front line in their respective sectors. Advancing in a single echelon, their leading tanks forming a spectacular wall of armour, they spread terror on the Romanian troops, hastening the collapse of the front line and eventually routing both the 13th and 14th Divisions, which stood directly in their tracks. They were closely followed by the 3rd Guards and 8th Cavalry Corps, covering their flanks, but the infantry lagged behind, stuck in heavy fighting against the fiercely resisting adjacent Romanian formations, particularly the 5th and 15th Divisions.
The offensive. It was always expected with tension. Most of all, first assault. From its success depended the course of the entire operation. It was awaited by counting days, hours and minutes, especially the very last ones. Everyone at my command post was looking feverishly at his watch. The fog did not lift. I called Vatutin. "We won't wait for the weather to improve," answered the front commander in his usual untroubled voice. At the appointed hour, the god of war struck with all his might. Hundreds of tons of metal fell down on the enemy. All attention was focused on the main attack sector, where in a matter of hours, the fate of our offensive should be decided. It became soon evident that our troops could not overcome the second line of defense without armored support. I decided to commit mobile forces with the front's approbation. At 1300 hours we heard the clamor of our tanks rolling out. The spectacle of watching them rush forward appeased my soul.
However, despite these breakthroughs, the Romanian flanks held on, making the general advance more arduous than planned. The arrival of the 48th Panzer Corps in the region, though acting precipitously and without coordination, nonetheless contributed to the breakdown of 1st Tank Corps' advance in the area of Bishani, whereas the 26th and 4th Tank Corps came to a stall respectively at Klinovoy and on the Kirtlak River line due to strong Romanian opposition. Only the 69th and 45th Tank Brigades of Kravchenko's Corps continued to drive forward well after nightfall, finally reaching the vicinity of Manawilin on the Krabkaya River. At about 1900 hours there was another conference. Paulus, bent over, was walking back and forth across the room. That he was more nervous than usual showed on his face. He said,
"Now has happened what I have been forecasting for weeks. Hitler does not want to accept as true what every simple soldier can see. Keitel and Jodl have supported him in this. For weeks we have had nothing but empty words. Now we have to dish out the soup. We have no idea if it is possible to block the Russian counteroffensive. The danger confronting us is gigantic. I see only one way out of this situation, turning away to the southwest. The fastest action is necessary.
In this case, must the Army really ask for a decision from the Army High Command? Here, we're talking about almost 330,000 men.
Even if it is to be or not to be, the whole of the 6th Army goes. I have, as you know, asked to abandon Stalingrad. That was refused. There is still the order whereby no commander of an army group or an army has the right to relinquish a village, even a trench, without Hitler's consent. Of course, the decision of every army commander has been diminished. But how will we get through the war if orders are no longer complied with? What effect would this have on the troops? However large the command of a general is, the men must be given an example of his soldiers' obedience to orders.
This basic attitude also determined Paulus's conduct in the weeks to come. Even though the necessity of independent action was still compelling, Paulus did not even consider it. He remained an obedient general. In this he was backed by his temperamental but also fanatical Chief of Staff, General Schmidt, and most of the commanding generals. At 2200 hours, acknowledging the grave threat, 6th Army deliberately ceased all offensive operations in Stalingrad, recalling the mobile forces in and around the city to go west and try and restore the defensive line. At the end of the day, the results were mixed. The bulk of Soviet forces was still stumbling around in the tactical perimeter of the front, while only some of the lead elements succeeded in reaching the operational depths and their assigned objectives. If a breach was undoubtedly made, anything could still happen in the upcoming hours, which would prove decisive for both sides. During the night of the 19th and 20th of November, the Army staff obtained a clearer picture of the situation. The 14th Panzer Division reported that the Red Army had thrust to a depth of about 30 kilometres with tanks and cavalry. Its artillery regiment had repelled several strong attacks. Fresh news from the 11th Corps indicated that the Romanians had been attacked by strong tank units without offering any serious resistance, the tanks simply mowing down anything that stood in their way. The remaining Romanian troops desperately fled to the south and east. The Romanian Third Army no longer appeared to exist. At 6th Army headquarters, no one could think of sleeping that night. All the section heads were assembled in Schmidt's office. Without any sign of internal excitement, the Chief of Staff described the new situation west of the Don and finished with these words.
The move of the Army headquarters to Nizhny Cherskaya is to be prepared. Orders have yet to come about the destruction of dispensable files, especially the secret ones. 14th Panzer Corps must direct the panzer regiments of 16th and 24th Divisions to the west bank of the Don, then strike the flank of the Red Army forces advancing from the heights west of Golubinskaya and destroy them. The staff of 14th Panzer Corps will take over the Army's command post at Golubinskaya. 14th Panzer Division will also be attached to it. The assault troop activities in the city are to cease immediately. All available troops on the fronts of the 8th and 51st Corps will be withdrawn as reserves for the Army. The bridgehead on the west bank of the Don, west of Kalach, will be reinforced by the engineer and anti-aircraft artillery units, along with all dispensable troops from the rear services and placed under command of Colonel Mikosh. The officer cadet school in Suvorovsky is to be made ready to move. Army headquarters will be transferred to Nizhny Cherskaya on 21st November. Colonel Adam is responsible for the move. Wounded and not required supply troops will be moved to the area south of the Chir River, where the Russian attack is threatening the railway line and the main supply route.
Paulus approved this proposal. The orders were prepared and dispatched to the units. Midnight was long past, and no new reports were expected before daybreak. For the moment, there was nothing to do at Army headquarters, so Colonel Adam escorted Paulus to his quarters.
If your headquarters had allowed my proposal to withdraw the 6th Army behind the Don, we would have been spared this difficult situation. Hopefully Hitler and his entourage have now at least some understanding and will order the city to be abandoned. That is no longer easy today with the whole of the Romanian Third Army smashed out of the Don front. The Russian tank and cavalry units have practically no one in front of them. I have little faith that Heim's 48th Panzer Corps can slow down this thrust.
If you're expecting such an order from Führer headquarters, General, it would be expedient to initiate preparatory measures.
I have proposed to Army Group pulling out all the troops from the city. Obviously, I cannot let this intention become known to the troops yet. That would only cause panic and at the very least lead to a reduction in the will to resist. The Corps staffs are already busy dealing with this question. At least it must be clear to them that the orders signed by me previously have the aim of extracting the army from the threatening encirclement.
They had reached the Commander-in-Chief's accommodation. Adam excused himself and went back to his own quarters for what was left of the night.